He never stood a chance. Not in their eyes. Not when he walked into that courtroom wearing a second-hand shirt 3 sizes too big. Not when his sneakers squeaked with every step, soles flapping like they were begging to be retired. And definitely not when Judge Crawford looked up from the bench and smirked. The courtroom was filled that day. Lawyers in tailored suits, reporters clicking their pens, spectators murmuring behind folded programs. But the second he walked in, everything went still. He wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't on the docket. He wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't even old enough to drive. Just a kid, a poor kid, with a tattered folder in his arms and a fire behind his eyes that not even poverty could dim. Judge Crawford's gavel came down hard. I don't take legal arguments from children, especially not ones who can't even afford a decent pair of shoes. Get out now. Gasps, snickers. And somewhere in the back row, someone actually laughed. But he didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't move. He just stood there and slowly opened the folder. Inside, 4 pages, handwritten, crisp, organized, with highlighted notes and footnotes quoting federal law from 1872. Judge Crawford glanced down and paused. That pause, it would change everything. You see, this wasn't just any kid. This was Eli Thompson, a 13-year-old from Cincinnati. The boy who read legal journals in abandoned libraries, who studied case law by flashlight after tucking his grandmother into bed, who taught himself American constitutional history while other kids were watching cartoons. And in the next 27 minutes, the same judge who humiliated him would be quoting him. The same courtroom that laughed would fall silent, and the law that was used to evict his family would be dismantled, word by word, by the very boy they tried to erase. So if you think you know how this story ends, think again. Because sometimes justice doesn't wear a robe. Sometimes it wears hand-me-downs and carries truth in a backpack. Let me show you what happened next. Cincinnati, Ohio. A city with a heavy industrial past and dreams rusting in silence. On the far west side, near the old freight train tracks that roar every night, lies a neighborhood called Lower Hill. No one there is rich, no one holds power, and no one really listens to the people who live there, except one boy, Eli Thompson, 13 years old, lean frame, brown skin, soft curls, and a hand-me-down backpack that never leaves his shoulders, like it's carrying more than just books. Maybe it's carrying the weight of being unseen. Eli lives with his grandmother, Ms. Geraldine, a retired nurse who once cared for hundreds of patients, but now can't even afford her own medication. Their house sits just a few feet from the proposed new streetcar line. The city said they had to go. Urban development, they called it. Public interest. But somehow, that public never included people like Eli and his grandmother. No one asked them. No one explained the law. They just taped a notice to the front door. Eviction order, effective immediately. But Eli wasn't like the other kids in Lower Hill. He didn't shoot hoops after school, didn't bury his face in a phone. Instead, he spent hours inside an abandoned church, digging through boxes of old books that everyone else had forgotten. That's where Eli found something sacred: law, history, landmark cases that changed the course of America. Gideon versus Wainwright, Brown versus Board of Education, and more importantly, the rights of citizens when the government tries to take their land without due process. He read, took notes, summarized, marked every clause with a stubby pencil. One night, Eli looked up and asked his grandmother, If the law says they can't do this, then why are they doing it? She just sighed. Because they know folks like us don't have anyone to speak for us. Eli clenched the pages in his hand. Didn't say a word. But that night, under the dim glow of a flashlight and the distant wail of a passing train, he wrote his first legal objection, by hand, fueled by anger and by one quiet promise. If no one else would speak for them, then he would. The next morning, he walked 3 miles to the county courthouse, alone, no lawyer, no tie, just a 13-year-old boy with a folder full of hope and a single belief. Truth doesn't need wealth to exist. It just needs someone brave enough to say it out loud. The courthouse steps felt taller that morning, the marble floors colder, the walls heavier. Eli had never been inside a place like this. It smelled like paper, polish, and quiet power. Men in expensive suits brushed past him like he was invisible. A few glanced down at his shoes, the soles uneven, one held together by duct tape. Still, he kept walking, clutching that folder like it was his shield. Inside were pages he'd worked on for 3 straight nights, handwritten arguments, citations from case law, and a plea to delay the eviction. He approached the front desk, cleared his throat. "Excuse me, I'd like to file this objection. It's about an unlawful eviction." The woman barely looked up. "Where's your parent or guardian, sweetheart?" "I'm filing on behalf of my grandmother. She's sick. She can't walk." A pause, then a smirk. "You need an attorney for that, kid, or at least someone who knows what they're doing." "But I do," Eli said softly. "I studied the statutes. Section 4, Subdivision 2C Security," she called out. 2 uniformed men appeared. Eli backed up a step, but stood his ground. That's when Judge Crawford walked by. He was taller than Eli expected, broad-shouldered, face carved in confidence, the kind that had never been questioned. He paused when he saw the commotion. "What's going on here?" The clerk gestured toward Eli like he was a spilled cup of coffee. "This child thinks he can file a legal motion, says the city's breaking the law." Crawford raised a brow, then chuckled, not kindly, not amused, mocking. "Bring him into courtroom 3, he said. "Let's give him an audience." The guards led Eli inside. He stood, alone, before a full room. Court staff, reporters, bored law students, people scrolling on their phones waiting for the next case, now watching him. Crawford took the bench, adjusted his glasses, then leaned forward. "All right, young man, impress us. Tell the court what you believe we did wrong." Eli stepped closer, opened his folder, hands trembling slightly but voice steady. "Your Honor, the eviction issued to my grandmother violates City Zoning Code 12.7b as well as—" Laughter. One of the junior attorneys in the back couldn't hold it in. Whispers rippled across the courtroom like wind through dry leaves. Judge Crawford slammed his gavel. "Son," he said, standing, "this court doesn't entertain conspiracy theories written in crayon. You don't belong here. Go home. This is for professionals." Gasps. Silence. Eli didn't argue, didn't beg, didn't cry. He closed the folder, turned to leave. But as he stepped away, a sheet of paper slipped from his hand, floated down onto the courtroom floor. No one noticed. No one. Except a young clerk named Monica Reyes, sitting in the corner taking notes. She picked it up out of instinct, read the heading, froze. Because what she held wasn't nonsense. It wasn't theory. It was a direct quote from a federal land use ruling in 1872, cross-referenced with Crawford's own published opinion from 1999. Her pen dropped. Her eyes locked on Eli. Wait, who wrote this? But Eli was already gone, out the door, back into a world that didn't expect him, didn't respect him, didn't listen. Not yet. But that was about to change. For the rest of the morning, Judge Crawford didn't mention the boy again. The court rolled on. Property disputes, noise complaints, a messy inheritance case. It was business as usual. Until Monica Reyes opened that paper again. She couldn't stop staring at it. A single page. No letterhead, no signature, no credentials. Just facts, layered with nuance, precision, and handwritten clarity. The kind of clarity she'd only seen in law school finals, from top students. But this wasn't written by a top student. This was written by a boy in beat-up sneakers, a boy who had no right to speak, yet somehow said exactly what no one else could. Monica excused herself, took the paper to the back hall, pulled out her laptop, and started digging. Line by line, she checked his references. Thompson v. City of New Haven, 1872. Real. Land Zoning Clause 12.7b. Accurate. Historical precedent from Crawford's own 1999 Law Review article, word for word. Her mouth went dry. She reread the paragraph again and again. This wasn't luck. This was deliberate. This was someone who understood the system better than most people working inside it. She printed it out, circled a few key notes, then did something reckless. She walked straight into the judge's chambers. Judge Crawford was reviewing a case file when she entered. "You better have a good reason, Monica," he said, without looking up. "Sir," she began, "I think you made a mistake." He glanced at her, annoyed. "Everyone makes mistakes, Reyes. That's why we have appeals." "No, sir, not that kind of mistake." She slid the paper across his desk. He read the first paragraph, paused, his jaw tightened. Then he saw the citation, the one from his own article. That hit like a slap. "Where did this come from?" he asked, suddenly sitting up straighter. "The boy you threw out," she replied. Number this was drafted by an attorney. I recognized the format. "No, sir," Monica said. "It was handwritten by him. I watched him. I picked this off the floor after you dismissed him." Silence. Crawford looked away, like the truth was too bright to stare into directly. "Find him," he said. Monica blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said find him," Crawford repeated. "Track the address on the eviction notice. Bring him back here. Now." Meanwhile, Eli sat on the front steps of his grandmother's house, head down, folder pressed to his chest like a wound he couldn't stitch. He hadn't cried, not really, but something inside him had buckled. Not because they laughed, he was used to that, but because he thought the law would protect him. He believed if he studied hard enough, if he spoke clearly enough, the world would listen. But they hadn't, at least not yet. Just then, a dusty sedan pulled up. Monica stepped out, heels clicking on the cracked pavement. She approached slowly, kneeling beside him. "Eli?" He didn't look up. "My name's Monica. I work at the courthouse." Still nothing. "Judge Crawford, he read your notes." Now Eli raised his eyes, just slightly. "He wants you to come back. Today." A long pause. Then Eli stood. No words, just a slow nod. And as they walked toward the car, Monica whispered, "You're not just smart, Eli. You're right." And that scares people more than anything. The courtroom didn't feel the same that day. No more laughter, no more side eyes, no more whispers behind hands. only expectation. A strange tension hovered in the air, like everyone could sense something was about to break wide open. Eli walked in, not fast, not afraid, just calm. Still hugging that worn-down folder like before, but this time his eyes were different. He wasn't looking for permission. He walked in like he belonged. Judge Crawford sat high on the bench, no longer smug, just alert. He gave a slow nod and pointed toward the witness stand. "You may present your case. All of it this time." Eli nodded back. He opened the folder, this time pulling out 3 clean copies of his document. One for Monica, one for the judge, one for himself. And then he began. "Your Honor, my family doesn't oppose progress, but according to Ohio zoning law, eviction without written notice at least 90 days in advance is illegal, especially when the occupant is elderly or medically disabled." Eli spoke clearly, each word deliberate. He turned each page with precision, quoted each statute by memory, even referenced an 1872 case that Crawford had written a legal commentary on years ago. People sat up straighter. A law student in the back started taking notes. A senior attorney stopped scrolling his phone and stared. Crawford's hand gripped the bench, not in anger, but in realization. The boy was right. Eli continued. "In your 1999 commentary, sir, Land and Dignity in Modern Jurisprudence, you wrote, 'The law should serve not only those who can afford it, but also those who need it most.' I'd like to ask, Your Honor, does that still hold true today?" Silence. Crawford stared at Eli, longer than expected. He didn't speak right away. Then he exhaled and nodded. "It still does." Eli gave a small bow of his head. No smile. Just peace. Monica wiped a tear, still composed but deeply moved, her hand resting on the very packet Eli had handed her days ago. The second twist. Who the boy really is, just as the room began to settle. The back doors opened. An elderly woman, Ms. Geraldine, Eli's grandmother, was wheeled in quietly and seated near the front row. Eli ran to her, held her hand tightly. But then, a tall, silver-haired man entered behind her. Straight posture, quiet intensity. Holding a folder of his own, he stepped forward, introduced himself to the court. "My name is Charles D. Thompson, former professor of constitutional law at Columbia University, and Eli's maternal grandfather." A ripple shot through the room. Some recognized the name. The man who vanished from public life years ago after a scandal that was later revealed to be fabricated. He raised the folder. "I have mentored Eli since he was 7. What you heard today wasn't luck. It was legacy. It was justice passed through blood." The court's response. Judge Crawford sat back. He issued an immediate stay on the eviction, ordered a full review of not just this case, but all forced evictions in the district over the past 5 years. Eli was invited to speak at the Ohio Young Law Scholars Forum. Monica proposed a community-sponsored legal scholarship in his name. And then, a hashtag was born, spreading across campuses, legal blogs, and eventually, the news. #, let Eli speak. #, justice has no age. It started with a single case, one folder, one voice, one moment of truth that broke through marble walls and silent traditions. But what Eli did inside that courtroom didn't stay within those 4 walls. It spilled into the city like ink on paper, quiet at first, but impossible to ignore. The legal system responds. Within 48 hours, Judge Crawford filed a formal request to pause all pending eviction cases tied to development projects. City attorneys were ordered to reevaluate zoning enforcement policies, particularly those disproportionately affecting low-income families. Law schools across the state began discussing the Eli Thompson case in real time, a living, breathing example of how legal brilliance doesn't always wear a suit. A committee was formed, not to question Eli's credibility, but to listen to him. He was invited to testify before the Cincinnati City Housing Council. He came in the same old backpack, same duct-taped shoes. This time, no one laughed. No one dared. When he stood behind the podium, he said, "You don't need to fix the law. The law is fine. You just need to stop using it to silence the people it was meant to protect." The room went still. Then, applause. Slow. Then stronger. The community awakens. In Lower Hill, something changed. Neighbors who'd never spoken before began meeting in the park, sharing notices they'd once thrown away, helping each other understand their rights. A local nonprofit set up a justice pop-up tent twice a week, free legal education. Guess who their first guest speaker was? Eli. He taught families how to read their own eviction letters, how to challenge illegal clauses, how to be their own advocate. One woman, Maria Lopez, later said, "That boy saved my home, and he did it without charging me a dime. He just handed me knowledge, and that was enough." A judge redeemed. And Crawford? He changed too. Gone were the sarcastic remarks, the casual dismissals. The gavel now hit softer, slower. One morning, he called Monica into his chambers. He handed her an envelope. Inside, a handwritten recommendation for Eli, addressed to Yale's pre-law summer program. "He's still got a lot to learn," Crawford said, "but not about the law, about how to live in a world that doesn't always see people like him." Monica smiled. "He already knows. That's the part the rest of us are just catching up on." A legacy begins. Months later, the City Council approved a new resolution, the Eli Act, mandating legal literacy programs in all public high schools, creating protections for elderly and low-income families against aggressive land acquisition, establishing a legal mentorship pipeline for underrepresented youth. Eli didn't want credit. When asked what he thought of the bill, he just shrugged and said, "It's not about my name. It's about making sure the next kid doesn't get thrown out before they even get to speak." One last scene. The story doesn't end with a victory speech or a fancy suit. It ends like it began, with a boy sitting under the cracked windows of an old church library, reading, highlighting, learning, still wearing the same shoes, still holding the same fire. But now, the world watches him a little differently. They don't see a poor boy anymore. They see what he always was, a reminder that justice isn't a system, it's a choice, one you make every time you decide to listen. They said he was too young, too poor, too unqualified. They looked at his clothes, not his clarity. They judged his background, not his brilliance. They dismissed his voice until they couldn't. And that's the thing about truth. It doesn't shout. It waits. And then when the time is right, it echoes. Eli never asked for attention. He wasn't looking to go viral. He didn't fight to prove anyone wrong. He fought because someone had to be right. He wasn't the smartest kid in the city. He just refused to believe that silence was safer than standing up. And in a world built to ignore boys like him, he made them listen. But here's the truth. Eli shouldn't have been the exception. He should have been the standard. Every courtroom should have eyes open to the unseen. Every judge should carry more humility than ego. Every school should recognize the genius hiding behind frayed uniforms and late lunches. The law needs more Elis, not just because they're brilliant, but because they're brave. They're the ones who read between the lines, who know that justice isn't about who speaks the loudest, but who refuses to stay silent. If you're watching this right now, maybe you know an Eli. Maybe you are one. Maybe you're raising one. Or maybe, just maybe, you've been the Crawford in someone else's story. And if that's the case, here's your second chance. Not to rewrite the past, but to listen better, to act more justly, to speak up, when staying quiet would be easier, because what this world needs isn't more noise. It's more courage, more clarity, more people willing to ask, is this fair? Even when it costs them everything. Eli did that, and he was 13. What's stopping you? Call to action, CTA. If this story moved you, share it. Not because it's inspiring, but because it's necessary. Let's create a world where courage, like Eli's, isn't rare. It's expected. And to every young mind watching this, don't wait for permission. Your voice is valid. Your mind is powerful. And your truth, it deserves to be heard. Let the world know justice has no age, no dress code, no gatekeepers. It only needs someone willing to speak. Be that someone. What would you have done if you were in Eli's shoes, standing alone in a courtroom, holding only the truth? Do you believe one voice can really change the system, or does justice still belong to those with power? Let us know your thoughts below, and share if this moved you.